request recording. Okay, so today's demo is going to be all about how to mount your wax pattern onto the pouring cup. And a lot of this should hopefully feel very familiar because it's not that different than what we did for the ring. It's just a larger scale, okay? So a few things that I have on the table. I've got this wax pot, and really, and we've been using this to cast sheets and whatever else, but I bought this one specifically to flatten the bottoms of things. So if you have a figure and as you've been working on it, the bottom has gotten unflat, this is if it fits in the inside of this pan, this is a quick way to flatten your wax. But also we want the bottom of our pouring cup to be flat as well. So that's another reason why we use this pan, okay? So that's the pan. I have my soldering iron. I have a box of T-pins. I've got my pattern. I have my pouring cup, which was made exactly the same way that I showed you for the quick casting with the clay slab, except we have a plaster mold, but pour in the wax, let the perimeter cool, dump out the excess, and then float the pyramid out with some water. So pouring cups can be, you'll see them in different shapes and sizes depending on what studio is casting what. But generally speaking, they are a base that is big enough to support your object. So as I'm looking around the room, I think that everyone is going to be fine with a pouring cup this size. I think the two exceptions may be Yang and Lisa. There is another pouring cup mold that is a little bit larger. So you don't need to worry about it unless I identify yours as being either oversized or like Andriane has that tiny little dog, so she located the smaller pouring cup mold. So my pouring cup is done. I have some gating wax. This is thicker than what I need, but I just realized, oh, we don't have 1/4 inch gating wax, so I'm gonna have to order some right quick, hopefully in time for you all to use this. There's nothing wrong with using a larger gating wax. You might just have to taper it down as it meets the pattern. I also have a scale up here. I have my cereal box cardboard, and I've got an X-Acto knife, and then I've got my Sharpie so that I can draw things out for you on the table. So the first thing I drew out is the calculation that you need to do with this particular wax for the specific gravity of bronze. So I'm going to just turn on my digital scale here. It's measuring grams right now. Let's just do pounds. So this is 11.5 ounces. So not quite a pound. So I don't want to make the mistake of doing 11.5 times 10. So 16 ounces and a pound. I think we can say, can we say 0.75 if I'm doing my math correctly?
Yeah.
So this is ounces. So 0.75 pounds times 10 is going to be 7.5, right?
Yep, correct.
Plus 4. So the
11.5.
plus 4 is for your pouring cup and the gating, right? So we've now weighed how much our pattern is, and then we're just adding another 4 pounds to accommodate for the bronze we need to push the bronze through the pouring cup, through the gates, and into your pattern. So that's another 4, so 11.5. 11.5 pounds.
Good
Okay.
question.
Yeah.
Why don't you wait till it's completely gated and knotted and then weigh it? And just use that.
You can do it that way. It's just habit. This is the way we've been doing it for as long as I've been here. So, yeah. But sometimes it's also, I don't know, it could be a little more awkward to weight everything.
So what is the multiple for the bronze?
So the weight of the wax
Uh-huh.
times 10
Plus,
plus 4 for the pouring cup and the gates.
And it's 4 is what, 4 pounds?
4 pounds. So all of this, so basically in order to pour my less than 1 pound pattern, I need 11 and a half pounds of bronze to pour this. So once I have that calculation, I mean, write this down in your journal. This is all part of your like daily record keeping. And then the next thing that you're going to do is to, if you can, write backwards, do so. But if that's too much for your brain to process, which I totally understand, you don't have to do that. But you'll want to carve your initials into the outside of one of the walls of the pouring cup.
Petra?
Yeah.
If you do it on the outside, isn't that gonna get covered with the silica?
Correct. And that's what we want, because then it's going to register who I am and how many pounds of bronze I need on what will end up being the inside of my mold wall.
Oh, okay.
oh yeah.
So it's,
It's
if you do it on
such
the
a-
inside,
it's
it's
a
not gonna
3D
show up.
I
puzzle.
felt that
It
light
melts
bulb
away.
go off.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Your initials and your bronze weight?
your initials and your bronze weight
In pounds.
in pounds.
The overall weight of everything, right? Or just
Correct. So I'm gonna write 11 point. Let's see. Can I do a 5 backwards?
Do you do a 5 or do you do an 8? Like, do we know that that's half the pound, or are we doing it like just straight decimal, or?
I am doing 11.5. Yeah, not the half sign. Okay,
Why
so
didn't you use the,
it looks like this when I'm done. Okay. So my name, which was easy enough to do backwards, and then 11.5, also backwards. What was the question?
No, you answered it, it's fine.
Okay, so, and I'm doing that first so that you don't forget to do this, because I can't tell you how many times we've burned out wax from the mold and we're like, I guess we have to guess, like how many pounds of bronze we need for this, because it's very easy to forget that step of weighing the wax. Okay, so now I've got my pouring cup, my name and poundage is engraved on the side. Now I'm gonna turn this over. And the top of my pyramid here is my gate mounting platform, okay? So when I say that you've done this before, remember that when we had the flasks for your rings, imagine that this is the rubber flask base and then this is the little nipple that sticks up. And then we are going to mount the pattern in the same way that we did the rings. So we want to avoid completely horizontal planes. So I'm gonna just tilt this a tiny bit. And then notice that I'm mounting it, I will be mounting it in this direction and not in this direction, okay? The reason for that, and this is where I'm going to get my little bird over here. Once we have everything mounted, gated, everything is secure, then we're going to clean the wax, we're going to spray the wax with an acrylic spray, and then we will commence the dipping that is building up the mold. So, this will be mounted like so, and then over in the slurry room, which I have not showed you yet, you're going to take your wax pattern and pouring cup and turn it upside down to dip it into the slurry bucket, and then it has to drain. So the slurry is a liquid solution, and then we add the silica sand to that, and the slurry helps the silica to stick, right? But you can imagine that if I dip all of this into a soupy concoction and then I'm letting it sit this way for a very long time, I'm gonna have liquid pooling in this cavity. And that can prevent the silica from sticking well, and it can also elongate the dry time, right? So you want, because we're on such a time crunch, we want our layers of mold to dry as quickly as possible. And if you have a situation like this where you're letting the slurry pool in an area, in the end, that can actually compromise the mold and you can have breaks in the mold, right? So you really want to make sure that all 10 layers of slurry and silica that we are applying to this scenario, that they all dry properly. And if you have these pools, then things aren't drying properly, okay? All right, so on to the next step. So I will diagram whatever you all are going to be gating, right? But because we've got mine here, here's my pouring cup. Generally speaking, we start with at least 3 gates. We may add more depending on a couple of things, either the complexity of your pattern or our need to support your pattern. Sometimes we're putting in gates just for support, no other reason, but like your piece is too awkward and cumbersome and we just need like another little arm holding things up, okay? Mine's pretty easy, it's just kind of a dome shape, right? So I'm going to do 3 gates that will support the piece. So remember when you were mounting your ring wax and I said you want 1/2 inch between the lowest point of your ring and the nipple. You are going to have that same consideration here. So if I mount my piece like this, I want, let's say, what is this, like 3 inches? A minimum of 3 inches, but I don't want it like way up here either, right? So I would say 3 inches between the top of your pouring cup and the lowest point of your wax. And then the higher points, because we're mounting it on an angle, that doesn't matter so much, okay? So from here to here, we want 3 inches. So this is where everyone's going to begin, depending on your piece. If you have little extremities, like you can see here on the bird, I mounted to the tip of the wing, right? I may have chosen to mount to the nose, the beak as well, because what happens is when we pour the metal in, it goes through all of the gates and then it feeds your pattern, just like lots of other things. Clay, when you're baking a cake, right? When things heat up, they expand, and when they cool, they shrink. So that shrinkage may pull bronze from extremities. So the tip of my beak might get lost if I don't gate it properly. Gating it properly could look like a couple of things. Putting like a little Rudolph nose on the tip of the beak so that the Rudolph nose fills with bronze, and if there's any shrinkage, it pulls from the Rudolph nose, not from the tip of the beak. The other option could be to create what's called a vent. So these are gates, meaning they are the direct feeders of bronze to your pattern. But sometimes when we're doing that, we're also pushing air through the mold. The molding material that we use is porous and it does evacuate air, but sometimes if you've got a lot of texture or if it's a very thin point, there might be an air bubble trapped down in there. So then the other option could be to vent, meaning that I would take a very thin piece of my gating wax and run it from the tip of the beak up to the side of the pouring cup, okay? So I'll do that with mine just to demonstrate it, even though I don't really feel like I would need it. Okay, so I'm gonna turn this on. Any questions so far? Okay. So while that's,
I guess, so, I do have a question.
yeah,
In
go
the
for it.
case of the Rudolph nose, then one sands off the Rudolph nose?
What?
If-
Yes,
yeah.
that you would just grind it off.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. There we go. Okay, so when I dumped out the excess wax, sometimes there's like a little lip that happens here on the inside. Can you all see that I've kind of like razored off some of that? And that's another kind of pooling preventative, but also I really wanted to see what the true thickness of my pattern was, because sometimes you just get like a little extra buildup. And this is really a better reflection of how thick the walls of my wax pattern really are. But if I had a very uneven bottom, again, you could just do a little of this inside of the pan, and it flattens everything out, okay? So I'm going to do the same thing to my pouring cup. Andrian was asking if we also need to smooth the sides of our pouring cup, and that is not so critical. It does help after we pour all the bronze. We try to, when we cut off all the gates, we try to recycle all of this. And if the surface of your pouring cup is smooth, then it means the surface of the bronze that we pour is also smooth, and it's easier to get the ceramic shell out, and it makes it easier to recycle. All right, I'm going to show you how to cut through the top of the pouring cup, and this is mostly geared at people who have oversized things. So Lisa and Young, this is for you. But if you are mounting your pouring your gates, and you find that like you're just not that great at welding the wax, it's worth your while to cut little holes into the top of the pouring cup and actually push your gate through, and that way you have two areas to try to weld the wax on the top, and then also on the underside of the cup. And it just makes the gate a lot stronger. So I'm just eyeballing. I know that I need a tripod, and we don't want them all sticking straight up. But the exact angle can be tweaked a little after the fact. So I've got my soldering iron on. I'm just going to turn it up a little bit. And this is where my buddies, the T-pins, can come in handy. Alright, so this is really long and unwieldy, and I'm just trying to stabilize it. Just so that I can start getting the welds in So just like with the mini wax welder, just as I demoed with when I made that little seed pod, and as Alex affirmed when we went to Splady, you don't want to keep your soldering iron in there for very long. You want to just get in and get out. And I've got a little bit of a gap around my gate. So I'm just adding a few more T-pins. And I'm just going to go ahead and cut through this. Just so the weight of the gate is not messing up my angle too much. Okay, so that's one gate in very loosely. And I'm gonna this is gonna be a process of a lot of tweaking, right? Because you're guesstimating at first, but now I'm realizing, okay, I need to really scooch this over. And as much as I can, I'm going to center the weight of my pattern over the center of the cup, right? So if this gate was vertical, then I'm doing this way off to the side, right? And that's gonna make it top heavy this way. So try to keep the bulk of the weight of your wax pattern over the center of the cup. So that looks better. So if I am mounting this here, then I want to get a sense of where my next gate is gonna go. So if I land it somewhere in this corner here, and I'll say this a few times over, your gates really need to be on the top of your pouring cup, not on the side. And the reasoning for that comes later when we're actually pouring the bronze. The way that we set up all of the molds, if you've got lots of branches growing out all the way around your pouring cup, then it kind of gets in the way of the way we need to hang them in the rack. So keep these little cubes, they're great for melting back in.
Is that red wax stiffer than the Victory Brown?
It is. The red wax, the gating wax is more brittle, but it kind of depends on the batch that we get. Because honestly, there was one time when we got a lot of the gating wax and it was way too brittle. It just it had no bend in it at all. And then other years we've had to cut it with a stiffer wax just to make sure that it would hold hold the weight of the patterns. Okay, so I'm coming in somewhere around here. going to just assume that over here on this other corner is going to be another spot, good spot for me to mount. So. And just like we did with the ring, I'm gonna have you, after I give you your gating instructions, I need to check all of your welds before you take it to any other next step. So if I was not cutting a hole into my pouring cup, the gating would look a little bit different. But I honestly, the more that I do this, the more I like it because it stabilizes everything. Otherwise, you're mounting your gate on the top and you're pinning it and then welding all around, right? So if you've got a very light pattern, I would say mounting it on the top of the pouring cup is fine. But otherwise I would say just go ahead and cut holes into your pouring cup. Okay, so now I've got them all in there but not welded. And this is my opportunity to kind of adjust my angles. And that looks pretty good. And just to make sure that my angles stay there, I could even pin this all in place. Although I am going to modify the top of these gates as they meet the pattern, but I'll get into that in just a little bit. Okay. So now I'm going to go around the base of each gate, and I'm going to use, if there's like a little burr buildup of wax, then I can just melt that to join. But if there's any kind of gap or deficit, you want to melt wax into the gap. And notice that I did not put the cardboard on yet. And that's because I'm gonna need to reach into the underside of the pouring cup. And if the cardboard was there, I wouldn't be able to reach in. And I will say now, and I'll say it again when I come around and check your welds, but these should be neat. You don't want a bunch of sloppy welds because then it's difficult to see where the errors are. So it's a fine line between like taking your time with joining all of these, but also you can't take forever either.
The pattern's falling over.
Thank you.
It was in motion. So,
Failure in action.
gravity sucks.
All right, so every time this happens, I know that I'm breaking welds. Okay, so remember that what I said about like don't push the wax together. This is-
It just looks like that smaller one needs to be set off to the side a bit more because it was uneven.
Yeah, I'm going to not put a bunch of weight on this right now, but let's just make sure. Here. All right, so let's do this without weight on there. So if you're in a hurry to get things to cool, your options are either the canned air or a bucket of cold water by your side. So you don't want to push the wax after you've kind of tacked a weld in place. You want to let it cool naturally.
And then can you like use an X-Acto knife to clean it up? Is that
Sure.
the easiest way?
Yeah, or just the soldering iron too, although that heats it again, right?
Yeah, I was just thinking like the way I would play at the very end before I fire.
Yeah, an X-Acto knife is always a great tool to have around. Also, if you use the T-pins to keep things in place, you will want to fill those little holes with wax after the fact so that the molding material doesn't get stuck in there. And make sure that it's not a weak point. David, can I actually ask you to fill a bucket with some cold water? That'd be very helpful. So if you recall when you mounted your rings, I think a lot of you experienced where you welded, sometimes the heat of the wax and the fact that it's melting, it kind of undercuts, right? So if here was your sprue where it made connections, there was a little scooping out, right? So that is what you want to avoid that. And that's why I've been adding wax in where the welds happen, so that rather than being undercut, it's more flared, right? So those of you who've taken ceramics, thank you so much. Where you have, when you join a handle to the mug, right? Sometimes you might roll out like a little baby coil to reinforce that. So be in the same mindset when you're doing the gating. A little bit of undercutting isn't going to hurt you, but it could weaken things. And of course you don't want weakened, because we've had some really sad scenarios when people get their pieces totally gated and things look good, and then we start dipping into the slurry and the silica, and then your gates fail. Like that's a really sad situation, because then you've got to like remove things, chip off some of the mold that's already been established, and like repair. So as long as we make sure that our gates are strong and supported from the get-go, then we don't have to worry about that. Yes?
Since you did the method of having the gates pushed through the pouring cup,
Mm-hmm.
should you solder it on the other side as
Yes.
well?
Yes, and that's exactly why I did not put the cardboard on the bottom yet, because, all right, just about done with the top side. Now I can flip it over and I can weld from the inside as well, okay? So I'm going to do that right now. And one of my gates is sticking through quite a lot. Don't worry about that. That's not going to hurt anything. Just leave it be.
Because that part's not even like covered by slurry, right?
Correct. So part of the reason why we put, well, the sole reason why we are going to attach the cereal cardboard to the underside of the pouring cup is so that the slurry does not go inside the pouring cup. Otherwise, that's something that you've got to like dig out, and again, takes a lot more time. So the cardboard is just a preventative cover. just about done here. And again, I may have to make some adjustments once I get my pattern up here, and I'll just show for the camera what it looks like on the top in terms of having good welds, although I'll have to double check that. And then also on the underside, I'll just kind of show that around, please.
What
So-
do you think about pouring the really hot pot wax inside the pouring cup to weld them all at once? Just a little bit. Just
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Give it a try. Yeah. Any
I feel like
other?
with that you'd have to be careful because depending on how thick you have the gating cup and how hot the wax is, it might melt it.
right. Yeah, you gotta be.
Yeah.
You have to think.
Do it quickly.
Yeah.
So that, because if you've already really specified the angles of your
Right.
gates, you just want to make sure that you're not compromising the angles or the strength. Okay, so while the pouring cup is going around the room, I'm going to talk a little bit and draw a little bit about the way that the gates should meet your pattern, okay? So let's just say this is the edge of my so-called body over there, my abstract dome. And here, so pattern, and then gate. And again, you have the benefit of experience with your rings already, but if you can just see, like, if this is the edge of my pattern and this is my gate, what's wrong with this picture?
It's inside as well as the outside.
The flow is restricted.
The flow is restricted. It's okay to have the gate a little bit on the inside and a little bit on the outside. But say more about the flow restriction. Like what do we need to remedy here?
So you need to connect that inside anti-wedge so that the metal flowing down the gate has someplace to go besides the end of the gate.
Yes.
You have to fill it in.
So if my gate, if I just cut it off and it's square, and my contact point
Let's move that.
with the pattern is just touching a corner, you're asking metal to kind of go through this insanely narrow funnel and then back into the pattern. So we need to
And
remedy
stay hot
that.
while it's doing it.
And stay hot while it's doing it, which is impossible. So really, what we're doing is making sure that it's kind of like one continuous flow. Okay? There are some times where we might taper it a little bit just to slow down the flow as it enters the pattern, but I don't think anyone here is in that territory. Okay? So what does that mean for my gates now that I'm ready to actually attach things? It means that I need to shape my gates accordingly. So I'm just double checking that my pattern's gonna fit here. Yes, I see a hand up out of the corner of my eye.
Do they have to be like straight or can they be bendy? Like your
Ah, okay, that's a great question. So do the gates have to be straight little sticks? The short answer is no. The long answer is that you really have to, without being an engineer and not knowing anything about flow dynamics, you want to think about flow dynamics, meaning if you picture like an average kitchen funnel, right? We have the cone part of the funnel and then the spout that it runs through. That allows a large amount of liquid to go into the top of the funnel and then come out in a stream through the opening. You kind of have to think about how the metal is going to flow into the piece. So if this is my pattern and my pouring cup is down here, I don't want to do something like this, right? We want a direct route as much as possible, right? So in this situation, straight lines are fine, right? But maybe if you all remember, some of you, when you were mounting your rings, I said, oh, those sprues are too close together. That's not gonna allow for enough investment to build up and you're gonna have a collapsed mold interior. Same thing here. So we might there might be a reason to do kind of a soft curve, okay? We don't ever want to ask metal to flow uphill, okay? So I think some of you, I talked to you about that when we were mounting your rings, right? So if you look at my little birdie here, the tail, in the pouring direction, the tail is my highest point. In my construction direction, it is the lowest point. So when you're mounting your pieces on the pouring cup, think you've got to have a gate going to your lowest point. But conversely, not conversely, but in addition to, you don't want metal to flow down and then have to come back uphill to fill the tip of the wing. And that's why I did a branch from one of my main gates to the tip of the wing, okay? And then again, the beak, if I were to put a vent on the beak, it couldn't be a straight line, right? So Tara's question about can it curve? Yes, in a scenario like this, it would have to curve to avoid hitting the body, right? We would come out like an upside down letter J and then connect back to the side of the cup. Does that answer your question? Okay. All right, so in prepping this to get it onto, bless you, the pouring cup, onto my gates here, just lining everything up. And this one, I think, needs to come down a little bit. So you can help yourself in terms of the gate meeting the pattern in an appropriate manner by not necessarily always doing straight cuts. You're probably going to do a lot of angled cuts.
Thank you.
I like that placement. So this one, I also, and hopefully you're seeing why we lay paper down on the tables, right? I don't have to worry about my wax dripping onto surfaces I don't want it to. That's looking pretty good. So what I'm going to do now is, again,
You slide with the smaller one, it's not quite touching.
yeah, and that's okay. I will adjust that, but good eye. You're already identifying a potential problem. Okay, so yeah, it's not quite touching there, and truthfully, like I said, this this wax is thicker than what I truly need. So I will be tapering all of these gates. I just want to make sure that it's still meeting the inside, and it is. quick work with the soldering iron so that I'm not undercutting the wax too much. And this is now too big for, well, is it too big for me to dunk in? Let's find out. If I want to cool things, so just know that when you cool the wax, when you touch the soldering iron to it again,
Be careful not to get a water bead and be splashed back at you.
yeah, like it's gonna sizzle a little bit. And I'm already noticing an error here, right? So I want this gate to touch the lowest part, and this is now dipping below my lowest part.
Mhm.
So
That's what I was saying earlier. You needed to move
okay. I misunderstood
You add a
you.
smaller gauge gate.
I could, but I'm just going to lower this one. And that should take care of it. Not enough. That's better. So this gate here is really sticking out a lot, and I don't need that, right? So I'm going to taper this, and in the process, I'm going to drip the wax into the crack. The other thing I should mention is that if you have a pattern that's very precarious and setting it down on the table is going to damage it, maybe you've noticed I have like a huge stack of foam in the alcove. That's what the foam is for, is so that you can cut it down to size, and then as you're kind of turning this and welding on all your gates, you're able to.
You might need to use some of that, like cut off bits of wax on the inside, because it's not really welded very much
On the inside, yes. So I'll continue working on this, but I think you all get the idea of what your agenda is. Having strong welds where the gate meets the pouring cup, and then angling your gates properly so that they touch all the necessary areas, and then making sure that where the gate meets the pattern is also a very strong weld. Okay? Thank you.
So all the base has to be